Welcome to the stream. I'm Malika Bilal. Millions of people in Indian-administered Kashmir are still living under curfew 9 days after India's pro-Hindu government revoked its semi-autonomous status. How are Kashmiris coping and what lies in store for them? Join the conversation through Twitter and YouTube. Articles 370 and 35A. Little understood beyond India's borders a few days ago, but the striking out of these laws has jolted Indian-administered Kashmir and chilled relations with neighboring Pakistan, which also administers part of Kashmir. Thousands of paramilitary soldiers are on the streets of Kashmir after the Indian parliament approved a decree stripping its rights to make internal laws. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi of the ruling Bharatiya Janata Party has heralded what he calls a new era for Kashmir. But hundreds of people ranging from political activists to university professors have been arrested. And a communications blackout means Kashmiris outside the region cannot contact relatives in Kashmir, including during Monday's Eid festival.
You're brimming with anger, but you do not know what to do about it. You're so helpless, but then you hope for a call, you hope for a text, you hope to know what's going on. So it's a combination of emotion. At one moment you might even smile, but the next moment you will have tears in your eyes, not knowing what is going back home and when will you see your home as you left it.
The very essence of Eid is to visit your relatives, visit your friends, be with each other, eat with each other, talk to each other, hug each other. That is the very essence of Eid. And we have been deprived of that.
Well, one of those who has faced difficulties contacting family in Kashmir is Natasha Cole, Associate Professor of Politics and International Relations at the University of Westminster. She is London-based, but today joins us from Montevideo, Uruguay. Baba Omar is a Kashmiri journalist at TRT World. He joins us from Istanbul. And completing our lineup is Shriram Chaulia, a professor and dean at the Jindal School of International Affairs. He is in New Delhi. Welcome to the stream, everyone. Thank you for staying up late for us. I want to share the comments of a few of our community members because so many people asked us to do this show and have lived experiences they wanted to share. So this is Jassim, who says, I haven't heard a single human voice from the region in over 10 days. Haven't heard from my ailing grandmother. No idea if my parents have essentials and medicines. Another person, Safia, says, our land is in lockdown. We haven't been able to talk to our families for 10 days now. We've been humiliated beyond measure. And one more here, Farhana says, today is the 10th day of military siege of Kashmir by Indian forces, where people have been restricted inside their homes and all communication to the outside world has been cut down. Baba, what has this past week been like for your family members and friends who are in Kashmir?
Well, it's been hell. I mean, it's the first time that there is an Eid, is a Muslim festival, and you're not being able to contact your relatives and your parents because there's a unilateral, there's an unprecedented communication blockade, which is unprecedented and which was never seen before. Like, we've been through 2008 mass protests, 2010 mass civil uprising, and then 2016. But even then, this kind of lockdown wasn't seen. So all the Kashmiris who have been outside Kashmir, they've been going through a very bad phase, and emotions have been, they've been running very, very high, and there's an anger as well. So like Kashmiris like me, we feel like cut off from our parents, and we also see at the same time our rights have been unilaterally abrogated without Kashmiris being taken into confidence or cognizance, and I think this anger is building, and it's kind of a volcano that's waiting to burst.
Natasha, what about for you and your family members? Have you been able to reach anyone?
Well, I have friends who are like family, and it is deeply worrying. And there is just no justification for anything like this to happen. It's unimaginable and it's unjustifiable by any standards to take a whole population and put them under siege while at the same time claiming to be developing them and not let them celebrate a festival, not let them communicate with their friends. And you can imagine the amount of distress that it causes everyone who's there. And, people who might need to go to hospital, people who might be ill, people who might want to hear from other people. it's I'm just amazed that there isn't more widespread and significant condemnation of what's going on. This is a whole population that's literally being put into a cage and isolated.
I want to share the perspective of one more person who says very similar things. We got a video comment from her. This is Farah Bashir. She's a former photojournalist for Reuters and an independent researcher, and here's what she told the stream.
Hi, today is the 10th day of communication blackout in Kashmir. I have not been able to contact my parents in the last 10 days, nor have they been. So this is not something you hear from democratic setups. Even North Koreans have access to intranet locally. This is completely unprecedented, and it's not only about disenfranchising a people of the status, but it's also about denying them basic dignity and human rights.
Sriram, why now, in your perspective, from your viewpoint, why do you think that this revocation happened now?
Well, first of all, I want to say that a lot of these, expressions of alarm and anger are not justified, and in fact, they contain quite a lot of exaggeration. The humanitarian situation, the medical supplies, the essentials, law and order, movement of people within their communities and the localities, all of them are going on. People offered prayer on Eid. People came out and, did what they had to in Kashmir. So I think, this projection that somehow it's under lockdown, I challenge that, first of all. It's biased and not based on objective reality. Secondly, why did we do this now? Why did India do this? Why did Narendra Modi do this? You see, the revocation of this special status was necessary to bring Kashmir into the national mainstream. What had happened was that Kashmir had developed into a very vicious, ethnically polarized society. Jammu and Kashmir, as it was known, 68% were Muslim, 28% were Hindus, and 2% were Buddhist and Sikhs. Now, what was going on within this, under the garb of this special status, was that the Kashmiri Muslim elites, some dynastic families, had monopolized power and were in some kinds of coalitions with other parties from Jammu, which is Hindu majority, and they were actually depriving the people of Ladakh of Buddhists. So what was going on was, it was a kind of a majority within a minority, and that was what had to be broken. So that was, I think, the motive for Mr. Modi to do this. And secondly, you see, administratively, socially, as well as economically, it was not doing well for the last 7 years.
I hear your point. Natasha wants to come in, and I will just say, before you do, Natasha, I will just say that I want to make this clear for our audience, of course, that we're hearing from people online and from our guests that communications, of course, are down in Kashmir. And so for you to say, Sriram, that everything is fine, and for our other guests to say everything is not fine, it's hard to know when we're not allowed in and when journalism is not allowed to happen. So I do want to push back on that point a little bit. But Natasha, what point did you want to make?
Can I just refute the facts from what Sriram just said? There's a very simple way of demonstrating that a population is not under siege. Allow them to speak. Why are the only Kashmiris that anyone in the world is able to reach right now to talk about Kashmir are all people outside? Allow them to speak.
Forever. The precautionary measure taken for national security.
I'm sorry, can I just refute two of your other points? Can I just refute two of your other points?
So, Sriram, your connection is dropping out, which is making it hard for us to hear you. But on top of that, Natasha is making a point, and she let you make your point. So, Natasha, you go ahead.
Firstly, if that's not the case, let Kashmiris in Kashmir speak. Secondly, to say that they were allowed to pray is hardly the way to understand the misery that Kashmiris are undergoing right now. An Indian fact-finding team that went there today was not allowed to screen their results at the press club. Thirdly, to say that this is about mainstreaming Kashmir, in what way? It is about how can Kashmiris be mainstreamed in all of this? What this is doing is mainstreaming Kashmir into a Hindutva agenda. And lastly, the point Sriram just made about elites, well, these are precisely the elites that allowed BJP a foothold in Kashmir. So what has Mr. Modi got to complain about in that?
Can I respond to this, please?
Please.
Yeah, listen, the situation on the ground is not at all as terrible as you're portraying it to be. And secondly,
but how do you know, Sridham? I want to hear your point, but I'd love to know how you know that, where your information is coming from.
The last 9 days you're talking about. And these restrictions are temporary. These restrictions are not meant to be forever. We're going to normalize the situation month by month, week by week. And in fact, the government has already announced that after Independence Day, which is 15th of August, gradually the restrictions are being lifted from sector to sector. The restrictions remain only in the most...
That's precisely how arbitrary power works. That's precisely how arbitrary power works in tyrannies. That's not how democracies function where there is accountability.
Baba, go ahead.
It's not ever. This is meant to be a measure, and I don't think we should be taking a mountain out of a molehill.
Mr. Sriram quoting government officials. I mean, why should we trust the government officials? They have been lying since day one. They said we feel a terror threat, and they sent police to the houseboat, hotels, and they managed to kick out the pilgrims and the tourists out of Kashmir. Then all the pro-Indian leaders, they went to meet the governor and all the top officials. And they were told that India will not tinker with 370 or 35A. Then suddenly everything is locked down. There's a blockade on Kashmir.
So Sridham, let Baba finish his point. I hear the point you're making about Pakistan, which of course we will talk about. But right now we're talking about Indian-administered Kashmir. Baba, finish up your point.
So I'm saying like the entire template, the entire discourse has been built on lies. There was a smoke screen that was created that there is a terrorist threat to the pilgrims and the tourists. Police went to the hotels and houseboats, and they told the pilgrims to leave Kashmir. And the pro-Indian politicians, Umar Abdullah, Mahbooba Mufti, and all these guys, they went to see Mr. Governor, they went to see Mr. Modi, and they were told that India will not tinker with 35A or 370. But what happened ultimately is India did exactly the same, which it promised not to do. So why should we trust the government?
So you mentioned the government, and I want to play a clip from the Prime Minister himself, Narendra Modi. Have a listen to what he said about this revocation.
Friends, I have full faith that under this new setup, we will all get together and rid Jammu and Kashmir of terrorism and separatism. This heaven on earth, our Jammu and Kashmir, will once again reach new heights of development and attract the whole world towards it. Ease of living will increase for our citizens. Citizens will receive all the benefits they deserve without any obstacles or challenges.
So Natasha, what do you think when you hear that? What do you believe the BJP government hopes to gain from this?
Well, I think Kashmir is a long-running movie for Indians where it plays as real estate, and the people as having walk-on parts. They're either exotic or cruel. What Mr. Modi, what you just played, his speech makes no mention as to how any of this is going to go about by simply labeling people's aspirations for their rights as being terrorism and separatism. Does he have a special device that can somehow make people act differently, behave differently, feel differently? Because if not, then all this is going to do, this is a well choreographed move which will happen with militarization, increased militarization overnight, and this is a well choreographed move that is meant to push Kashmiris against a wall and to try and incite them about their helplessness and incite them to greater violence. I think this has always been part of India's plan. In 2018, you had the army general saying, I wish the Kashmiris would use guns instead of stones because then we could shoot them. This is again another move that is meant, it's literally as if they're waiting for the optics of the Kashmiris to resist so that they can be even more brutal to them. This is part of a Hindutva agenda and literally nothing else.
So Sridham, I see you shaking your head. Sridham, go ahead.
See, I think a lot of fake news has been circulating, especially with international media, which have their own ideological biases here. I'll say that...
I'm sorry, this is not about international media. Don't just use the word fake news without... Respond substantively. Respond substantively to what I said. Don't say fake news. You're just being prompt.
People, okay? And for your information, the security forces have always acted with a sense of restraint in Kashmir over the times. And ever since the Pakistan...
How many prosecutions have we had?
So, Natasha, I'd love to hear what Sridham's point is on this. Sridham, go ahead.
portraying Indian army as somehow barbaric and all this. This is the straight out of the Pakistani playbook. Nitasha Kaul, from her surname, I guess belongs to the Kashmiri Pandit community. That community was actually ethnically cleansed. These were Hindus, minorities in Kashmir Valley. More than 500,000 of them have actually been forced to flee Kashmir and become internally displaced people due to jihadist threats. So, in a way, she's talking against her own community here. But let me come back to the bigger point, which is, this whole agenda of showing that there is some big human rights, being crushed of the people and all this is motivated by a sense of ideological bias. What you have on the ground is non-politicized, de-radicalized, ordinary Kashmiris of all faiths. Kashmiris, people of Jammu, people of Ladakh have appreciated what is happening because what they got in the last 70 years was no better. It was no better.
So, Sridham, okay, you had made your point. You made it a personal attack against Natasha, which this conversation is not for that. But I want to give Natasha the chance to respond to that very briefly, Natasha.
Yes, please. This is not about the army. This is about saying that you cannot have a military solution to a political problem. Secondly, about the Kashmiri Pandit issue, not just from my surname, but from my work over more than a decade, it becomes clear that resisting is the communalization of a political dispute. What Hindutva forces are doing is just weaponizing the Kashmiri Pandit issue and using it for their ends. What has happened right now makes Kashmiri Pandit's future even more hostage to circumstances and does not make them in any way more secure. They have not addressed the issue of why not call for justice for whatever has happened to Kashmiri Pandits and Kashmiri Muslims. Instead of that, why just go on playing this divide and rule?
So we mentioned the Pandit, of course, which were people who left, mostly Hindu, who left Kashmir, and you hear the debate right there on why they left and whether or not they were, quote unquote, ethnically cleansed or if they left their homes because of the changing demographics. So there's talk right now about people coming back and an idea of a settler community. I want to play a video comment from someone who talks about what this revocation might mean for the demographics of Kashmir. This is Mohammed Junaid. He's an anthropology professor and an expert in Kashmiri political movements. And here's what he told the stream.
India's decision to revoke Article 370 is catastrophic for Kashmiris because it lays a path for a future of settler colonialism in Kashmir, where Kashmiris will be reduced to a minority, a disempowered, dispossessed minority. Kashmiris know very well that this decision has not been taken for their development, as India is saying, but it is to secure the Kashmiri land for a Hindu India. This is basically the final blow to Kashmiris within that longer process. And we oppose it, and Kashmiris will oppose it. They are not going to sit quiet because for them it's an existential question.
Baba, is that a fear for you? What do you make of that comment?
Absolutely. Like we have the situation of Palestinians, how they have been reduced from majority to minority. And then we have an example in J&K already in 1947 when the Jammu genocide happened. The entire region was turned from Muslim majority into Muslim minority area. So the fears are genuine, the anger is genuine, and I don't know I think the Indian media is not playing a good role here. And Mr. Sriram, his information comes from the Indian media, which has been continuously saying that everything is hunky-dory in Kashmir, despite protests in Kargil, which is a district in Ladakh, despite protests in Saura, massive protests in Saura, which was initially denied by Indian government, and then after BBC and Reuters and Al Jazeera reported it, they've been saying that yes, they were protesters. So overall, the fear is that the Kashmiris will become minority in their own own state. Their orchards, their agriculture fields, their houses will be taken up, and they will be cut to size. And see what's happening with the Indian Muslims. The plight of Indian Muslims is before everyone. They have been cut to size. They have no representation in media. They have no representation in the politics. And now Kashmir was the last post for RSS and BJP to go and cut Muslims in Kashmir to size.
So Baba, as you're talking, Sriram is shaking his head. Sriram.
See, listen, this whole idea that somehow Muslims are under threat in India, this is a complete concoction. And this is part of the liberal international agenda as well as the Islamist agenda. Let me tell you the truth.
Are they not being lynched there for transporting cattle and consuming beef? Even today, Farouk Khan, who was lynched,
7 million.
who in
So
his
Baba,
dying-
one moment, because we can't hear Sridham. Sridham, finish up your point, and then Baba, you can get in.
Muslims in India, 180 million, are living peacefully and are integrated into their respective communities. They are not living like a ghetto, like in Kashmir Valley, where 97% of the people are Muslim. So if there is intermixing, if there is interdependence with other people of other faiths, if they are willing to live together, if the Kashmiri Pandits and the others who have been cleansed can be brought back and made to resettle, and if there is a more heterogeneous mix of the society, what's wrong with it? You people calling it, some kind of genocide, but let me tell you that this is how democracies should live. We should have a syncretic coexistence, not ethnic enclaves
So,
like we've
Sridham,
had in Kashmir.
I take your point. Our community would disagree with you. This is how democracy should live. I want to share this Twitter comment we got from Eunice, who says, imagine living in an open-air prison guarded by hundreds of thousands of armed forces on your favorite celebration, meaning Eid, with no communication with your loved ones. That is Kashmir right now. But I want to push us on just a little further with this tweet from Amara, who says, it does not matter whether you and I disagree or agree with the move. What matters is whether the 7 million people in the Kashmir Valley do. But no one is asking them. Talking about having a seat at the table, Natasha, so many people we've heard from feel similarly, like that this conversation is happening without their voices and without their say.
Well, that's precisely the point, that the Kashmiris are not made part of any conversation about their future in a substantive way. It always gets reduced to being about an India versus Pakistan issue, and both of these countries seek to use majoritarian sort of nationalisms in order to transform the state. And the Kashmiris are the people whose lives are affected by it and who are being suffocated from every side. Also, to just add a little point about what Sriram said earlier, I mean, it would be really nice if we just didn't make assertions without any proof. There have been 2 UN reports, one last year and one this year, and a whole literature that Indian mainstream media never reports about the goings-on in Kashmir. The fact is that this is not how democracies function. If you're actually concerned about people living together peacefully, then secularism, democratic principles, constitutionalism have to be key to that. And part of what has happened right now is also the attack on the constitution and the way in which it has just been treated in this cavalier manner. This is this move, this well-choreographed move, is not only a crushing of the Kashmiris, an attempt to do that, but it's also a strong signal to those who speak for secular democracy in India that they will be just labeled anti-national, or that their rights to dissent will be treated as fake news or something, because there is that whole Hindutva echo chamber within which there is no need for proof or evidence. You can simply say, well, we're doing this for peace, okay, we're doing this for development, let's hear it from the people who are sought to be developed, but that we won't let you have that. They're just having to live under this kind of militarized state endlessly. And on top of that, Kashmiri Pandits just are used as these pawns where, and even when, as recently, there was a set of Kashmiri Pandits who put together a letter, all that sort of thing is never amplified in Indian media, especially televisual media.
So I take your point, Natasha. We're running out of time here, but as promised, we said we would also talk about Pakistan. We have about a minute left, but I want to share this headline. Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan visits Kashmir amid India tensions. Baba, do you think that Pakistan should have a say in what's going to happen, or will they? Will they be able to?
See, the Pakistan stance is that there has to be a plebiscite, UN-brokered plebiscite in the region. And if there's a tinkering with 370, and if India is managed to take the territory as a union, make the disputed territory as a union territory, it ultimately, even if the referendum happens later, it won't go in Pakistan's favor. So that's Pakistan's position. But right now, I don't think they have many options. They have limited options.
Limited options, Baba. Unfortunately, that is where I have to pause this conversation. So much more to say, but that's all the time we have for this portion of the show. We can keep the conversation going, though, on Twitter @AJStream, and of course also on aljazeera.com/the stream. I know there's much more to add. Thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.